The history of Western Europe before the coming of the Romans is often seen as a dark age. The people who inhabited these lands were thought to be barbarians and savages. But this is not the case. There was a highly advanced Gallic civilization in southern France that existed prior to the arrival of the Roman Empire. The people who lived there were known as the Salyens, and in this episode of Bet You Didn't Know History, we're diving into who the Salyens were. The Salyens are most famous for constructing Entremont, or Oppidum in Latin. This city was presumably the Salian civilization's capital. Entremont was constructed around 180 BCE, and it is estimated that as many as 10,000 people lived there. Located on a plateau in the foothills of the Alps, Entremont was easily defensible. Walls were built around the settlement, which were over 11 feet thick and 23 feet tall. Defensive towers were also placed along the walls every 18 feet, and were 31 feet high. The city was well built. Entremont had grid-like streets, and each block of homes was divided by stone walls. Most of the homes were made of stone, with mud bricks used inside to create small structures like hearths. Typically, homes in Entremont had between 1 and 5 rooms. The town encompassed an area of almost 9 acres. The biggest building in the town was a massive religious sanctuary. Salyens were polytheistic, and this religious sanctuary was for the worship of their pantheon of gods. It was decorated with statues, sculptures, carvings, and most interesting of all, skulls. 20 skulls pierced with holes were found within the building, leading archaeologists to believe that they were nailed to the building at some point. These skulls may have been war trophies, or they may have belonged to ancestors. The building was coated with white lime inside and was set away from the rest of the buildings in the town to make it look large. The Salyens probably based this religious sanctuary off of Hellenistic temples they had seen in many Greek colonies. The first mentions of the Salyens appear in Greek texts from around 600 BCE. The Greeks founded a colony in southern France around this time called Massalia, which is modern-day Marseille. Massalia was near the mouth of the Rhone River, which allowed the Greek colonists to trade with much of Western Europe. As the Greeks established colonies in southern France, they first came into contact with the Salyens. The relationship between the Greeks and the Salyens was complex. While there was much trade, there was also constant tension between the two groups, which sometimes erupted into bloody skirmishes. The Greeks noted the Salyens' extreme brutality in their texts, vividly describing how Salyan warriors would mutilate dead bodies and take heads as trophies. Faced with opposition from the Salyens, the Greeks built 2 more colonies along the coast in an attempt to protect their trade routes. However, these continued to be attacked by Salyan forces. The Greek colonists decided to ask the rising power in the region, the Roman Republic, for help. The Greek colonists had supported the Romans in their wars against Carthage, and because of this, the Romans agreed to help defend the Greeks against the Salyens. However, there was one caveat. The Greek colonists had to join the empire in order to gain access to Roman protection. In 225 BCE, Roman legions marched on Entremont. The Salyan defenders attempted to resist, but they were no match for the Roman military. Roman ballistas and catapults hurled projectiles into the city, while defenders retaliated with slingshots and spears. Roman legionaries eventually breached the walls surrounding Entremont. The defenders continued fighting and slashed at legionaries with their iron daggers. The skilled legionaries used their javelins to impale the defenders. Eventually, the legionaries overpowered the Salyan defenders. Bodies lined the streets of Entremont. The city was then sacked and pillaged. After this bloody siege, the Salyans' culture and influence disappeared. Some Salyans managed to flee north and lived with other Celtic tribes. Most were deported, likely being sold into slavery. Some, who collaborated with the Romans, were allowed back to Entremont. They were not able to maintain peace with Rome, however, and the last of the Salyans were exterminated a few decades later. The region became a province of the Roman Empire, and a new Roman settlement was built next to Entremont. Around half a century later, an ambitious Roman general would pass through the region, seeking to put an end to the rest of the Celtic tribes and conquer all of Gaul. This general was none other than Julius Caesar, who likely passed by the ruins of Entremont as he marched towards the center of Gaul. In a matter of decades, Gallic culture and the Salyens would be lost to history. Bet you didn't know that! If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing.